motion?
A motion to convene in open session.
Second.
Roll call vote. Andrew?
Aye.
Susan Manning? Aye. Elizabeth?
Aye.
Eric?
Aye.
Maureen? Aye. Ayes have it. Motion is carried. All right. Order of business. There are no public appearances. And can I have a motion for the consent agenda?
I make the motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
Roll call vote. Andrew?
No, then we say we can just do all in favor?
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Aye. Yeah, we're not on,
Roll call, right?
yep.
All right, ayes have it, motion is carried. All right, moving on to recognitions.
Okay, so the first week of school was a great success. Our back-to-school nights leading up to the first day of school were well attended, and there were many smiling faces on the first days of school as students got to know their new teachers and classmates. And so there are a number of links for you with a lot of photos from all the various schools throughout the first week. As sport teams are getting started for the season, we want to wish all of our teams good luck for a successful season and great camaraderie. Congrats to the girls cross-country team as they placed first in the Monona Invitational. Also, great job to the boys soccer team, who currently have a 5-1 record. Keep up the great work. Granite Ridge School held their first ever school-wide assembly where staff showed students their skills in a relay race and also announced their official mascot, the Cranes. We were able to capture the initial excited cheer and reaction to the students. There's a link to the video. It's pretty exciting to watch. And a big thank you to the Vetter family who, through the Vetter Golf Classic, raised $15,000 for Monona Grove Athletics. The support of the Vetter family, sponsors, and community members who show support at this event does not go unnoticed. And this will be at our next board meeting for approval for the gift.
Well, and isn't Jessie working with the district?
She is. Yes.
She was at the breakfast.
Yes.
I just wanted to say in regards to the assembly and the announcement around the cranes, and I shared this with Katie, but I want to share it again, that the logo is fantastic. It's really cute and really well done, so kudos to the team that worked on that.
All right, no correspondence and announcements, administrative reports. Krista.
Shelby's going to join into a partner in crime.
Oh, Kristen.
And friends, exactly. Friends, perfect. Absolutely. It sounds better. It does.
You guys can have your own recurring segment at the board meeting. Kristen
Yes,
Friends,
here we
and
go.
the theme
That's
song.
great. Yeah, absolutely. Well, I don't know if it would be our topic of choice, but here we are, our annual seclusion and restraint report that you all got a copy of in board docs. So kind of a repeat format from previous years, as we are required to annually just share and report on our data on seclusion and restraint, and give a little bit of that overview in the report, just as usual, kind of standard, but you know, our staff members fully document any incidents and notify administration and the student's family, provide those written reports after the incident, following the latest update, the guidance there. And as you know, just always emphasize physical restraint and or seclusion are both or either used only as a last resort in situations when the student's behavior is presented a clear and imminent danger to self or others. I'm glad Shelby is here tonight to be able to join us. She's part of our team, one of our 3 in-house trainers that supports our large number of staff members trained in the use of nonviolent crisis intervention and support, safe, non-harmful physical restraint, and personal safety techniques. But as we discussed in previous years, like that is, while a critical component of that training, actually the bulk of the training is really around proactive de-escalation, verbal de-escalation strategies, and just other supportive measures. And Shelby has really worked hard to introduce new content for those numbers of staff members taking the refreshers. So sort of what are those new tips and strategies and ways we can think about students and do some problem solving around unique situations and of course, covering sort of that required content. So I don't know if you want to mention just a little bit of kind of what happened, like our routine, getting back into the routine after COVID and getting our staff sort of caught up and what our routine is for training and support for nonviolent.
Yeah, so we kind of adopted a hybrid model over the pandemic, so that there was some pre-learning, kind of asynchronous with a little bit of synchronous work, and then it paired with an in-person piece for our recertification. And then this year, we really focused again on our initial training, having it be 2 full solid days of in-person, if you haven't had the training before. So we now have over 60 staff members certified this year, recertified or initially certified, and now we're gonna hold another one in the fall for some of the new staff that were hired later.
And I think just so it's a requirement for all of our special education staff, our special education assistants, our student services team members, and we have a number of other staff members from various roles, clerical, administrators, classroom teachers who know they may be working with a particular student or group of students who are also elect to take the nonviolent crisis intervention training. And because we have Shelby and Deanna Blang and Lisa O'Roby, 3 trainers within the district, there's a lot of opportunity within the buildings to problem solve individual situations, as well as give some all-staff sort of overview around the verbal de-escalation, those proactive strategies. And, so that's something that we're glad to be able to offer with our in-house folks as well.
Yeah, just to echo what you said, our training is really focused on a lot, I mean, it's probably 5% of the actual physical pieces, really that problem solving, that proactive piece, and just how to de-escalate in a situation verbally and not verbally, and all those things that go into that. And some of our new staff who came in this year who have taken this training with other districts come into our district and say, this is actually, usually I don't look forward to NBCI training, but this was amazing. So kudos to Lisa and Deanna on that as well.
So I'll pause there, and you can see that the sort of the required reporting format is to share total incidents of seclusion or restraint, incidents involving students with disabilities, students without disabilities, and just, I think it's helpful to take a look at the number of students involved. You know, we're talking about a really small number of students district-wide, and then the number of students with disability, with or without disabilities as well. So that's kind of the breakdown. We can answer, I know there will be some questions, so we can answer sort of your questions about how, what you might just be wondering about how this compares to other years, or just what's on your mind.
So I have a question. So we're seeing across the country in many districts an escalation in mental health issues. So kind of keeping that in mind, are you making any changes in regards to that? Just kind of keeping in mind mental health? Is
Yeah,
that a
definitely
factor?
adding content to our, I mean, we basically tailor the training to our district and to the needs of our, obviously keeping the CPI content that's required, but we really tailor and infuse things that we're seeing, and then needs-based, principles, we talk to principals, make sure that we're infusing mental health, trauma-informed care, all those things, for sure.
I think having had, we do have a lot of new staff members, but that trauma, sensitive schools training, trauma informed care for students is not, like, other folks have come in with some background in that, either from their university training or other districts, and our large scale implementation of that, I really think has helped shift that narrative, and people do they come with richer questions. I think with the folks who are on the crisis teams who come to nonviolent crisis intervention training, I mean, they're asking higher level questions and problem solving, and really thinking about, how do we wrap around students and provide supports and connect families and students with supports in all the different ways that we can.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Eric.
Not counting the pandemic and the 2 years of COVID, looking at the numbers of incidents of seclusion and restraint, are those high? Are they low? Are they? I mean, obviously we don't want to see any, but are you concerned about any of the numbers?
I mean, in the past years, there's some variability. If you look back to 2018-19, which is pretty significantly lower. but higher than 1920, even though we only missed the last few months of the school year. So it is hard to say, and it really does depend on sort of what's happening in a particular year with a particular cohort of students. I would say we haven't noticed any particular trends, either in a vast increase or a decrease over time. I will say we have really in the past 4 to 5 years or so really emphasized kind of in our retraining of all staff around sort of the statutory piece. We really emphasized the importance of accurate reporting and not under-reporting, right? So I will say we've strongly encouraged, and our teams in the buildings have been really responsive to, like, if in doubt, like, this is something you need to report, and really clarifying what seclusion is. So I do feel like we're getting a, probably an accurate representation of what's happening, which is our goal, not to, like, again, we want to just be as accurate as possible so we can strategize and work together to, I think we said this last year too, we'd love our numbers to be 0. They're not, but we do want to ensure that we can be as responsive as possible when we are noticing incidences of seclusion restraint. And I will say that's the theme across the buildings. Anyone on those teams supporting students are very quick to get to problem solving when this happens.
Can I ask a follow-up?
Yeah,
So with that, with the training, nonviolent crisis intervention and training, is that required for all staff or just staff that teaches students with disabilities?
The required group is special education teachers, related services providers, I didn't mention, special education assistants, and student services, like counselors, social workers, most administrators, anyone who's on the crisis team, it is required for, and people in those roles are the ones Kelly was mentioning too. When we hire new staff late, or you miss the summer option, that's who we make sure is able to maintain their certification.
So I was
Open to others, and we have others.
Right, open to others, but not required. And that, I guess that's where my question would be with the numbers and everything is, again, looking at not the pandemic numbers, but the other numbers, the incidences with students without disabilities seem to be higher than incidences with students with disabilities. So my question would be, why is it required for all staff for the training? That could potentially maybe bring the numbers down even. I mean, I guess, could that potentially maybe bring the numbers down, or is there a reason why we're not doing that for all staff?
I think it's fair to say that the staff involved in any incidents of seclusion and restraint are those trained staff members in the building. I mean, I know that's not exactly what you're asking, so I do think classroom teachers have a foundational knowledge. And we have talked about too, like just how to make sure that we are bringing forward all of that good response, which is happening in the buildings, that proactive de-escalation, what does everybody need to know, and then the whole training piece is really, if there is ever a chance you are on a team who may have to work with a student in crisis, that's who we want to prioritize. And if we could find 2 days for everyone, yes, it's great content. I think just prioritizing where we need that is better emphasis.
Okay, thanks.
Elizabeth?
Yeah, I've got a couple of questions, mostly process related, and there's 2 numbers in here specifically that are a little alarming to me or concerning to me. The one is the number at Cottage Grove School that is a singular student, right, with almost double-digit incidences, and then Taylor Prairie, where we have 20 incidences over 3 students, right? So it's a significant amount of seclusion and restraint over a very small amount of child, right? And I get a little bit concerned when, particularly with our youngest learners, right, because, and this is true, you can look at trends here, you can look at trends in other districts, you always see seclusion restraint numbers go down as you get older, and most of that is because those kids are more difficult to restrain and to seclude. I mean,
Regulation.
I don't know that I necessarily agree with that. I think that there is some components around that, but in terms of the imminent threat aspect of it, I think that you're more likely to engage in seclusion or restraint activity with a younger child than you are with an adolescent, right? Just because of the nature of the size of the folks. And I want to remind Krista, for you, if you recall, kind of during the pandemic, one of the concerns about coming in that was expressed to me was like, well, how are we going to get close and do seclusion and restraint on kids? To which I said, good. That's actually a good thing, right? So my question to you is around our debriefing processes, around our revisiting functional behavioral assessments, around our IEP plannings, and around ensuring that really truly, when we say imminent threat, right, that we're talking about true imminent threat, not like I'm throwing stuff, right, and not necessarily like I'm even hitting, right, that we're really know what we mean when we talk about imminent harm to selves or others. And so sort of my question, so that's like my soapbox, right? So the questions are, talk me through again debriefing, talk me through again FBA, and IEP planning for our individuals that have disabilities around these instances specifically, because it's, I mean, like I said, 8 times for one youth that's a lot. That's not non-impactful, and those interventions are like they cause harm.
Yeah, so I'm gonna talk in the because to be really respectful, I'm not students,
Yeah,
right? And
yeah.
that is the piece about talking about this data. But in a hypothetical situation, I do think to just deepen a little bit what Shelby was getting at, there is, so yes, what you just said, that piece of the conversation for our youngest learners, that's a really deep part of the conversations we're having with those folks in the training, at the building level, with the problem-solving teams around these students, is just continuing to identify, like, how do we know what is a real threat? I will also say, though, that processing this and thinking this through and knowing a little bit about just what the teams in the buildings have experienced and what some students have come in with, that regulation piece and the age does play into it, in the sense that the likelihood of danger to self, there is a different threshold there for younger students. Like, again, a younger student who may be dysregulated and, for example, like leaving a school space,
Mhm.
being out in, like, there is a little bit less ability to discern the danger. So I do think we do see an increase in the aggregate of potential harm to self, and like the default to ensuring a student is actually safe is a little bit different for some of those younger
That's
students.
fair.
And I think it's fair to say that we have, we see really, everyone, people here who are in the bill, like, we see it's pretty significant, and harm, the danger is a piece of the puzzle, whether it's the danger to the self, the danger to staff, and which students in the range of 5 to 8, 9 years old can present with significant
Mhm.
safety concerns for sure. The debriefing process, I will say, it's an evolution as well. So sometimes when folks come in and they're brand new to school, and/or for our experience that we're talking about a year ago too, coming off of an unusual school experience, perhaps if you had a school experience coming into that, it was a reset and a reintroduction to school and the expectations of school, and lots of that mental health piece does play in about what kids' experience has been and whether there would have been a significant concern without the pandemic or with the pandemic. We certainly saw we all felt it, right? So there was an increase in sort of that, or decrease in the threshold for dysregulation at that time. But I will say, if this is occurring even the first time, the second time, the building administrators are aware. They're convening if the student has an IEP, the IEP team, but the problem-solving team, immediately getting to that FBA and the conversation. That's been a shift that is part of our just reteaching or relearning the guidance that is happening. And sometimes behavior, as we also know with behavior change, sometimes things get worse before they get better. And it takes some time to figure out what sort of supports are the most effective for our learners, and it's usually cyclical as well too. So different points of year things can work for a while, and then we revisit. And when we talk about the problem solving team in the building, right? So if the student has a case manager, great, they might be taking the lead on that with their student services team member, with their principal. I would say everyone is. We're talking about these 16 students are very well supported and well known, and a lot of engagement in that problem solving piece. And then as far as when we're noticing, again, even if it's a student with a disability or not with a disability, repeat incidences warrant a more intense response, right, from the team too. So I would say none of this is it's not an intervention or a strategy. I guess I'll leave it at that.
Right.
Seclusion or restraint is not part of the response plan. It's just a accurate picture. We are looking at those trends to see if they're decreasing and monitoring that. And then as far as like the IEP process or when that comes in, like, that's an evolution as well. Is that necessary? What levels of support are needed? And so this is what I've forgotten.
Oh, sorry, because I have
Yeah, go
I have a
ahead.
question, but I don't want to interrupt your thing.
Go ahead.
I think it's a fair point around inhibition, right? My ability to inhibit myself from doing a thing. So, for example, if you have a student who like elopes from the building, right, and my ability to like look both ways before crossing the street,
Correct.
very different developmentally. So I think that's a fair point. My wondering around the intervention component, and I appreciate you really calling out that like seclusion and restraint is an intervention or a strategy, right? It's an acute response to a specific moment and a specific need. Do we have in our processes like any like referral pathway triggers around some of these kinds of things, right? Like you've experienced seclusion and restraint X amount of times, right? Now we're gonna move into like school-based intervention, community supports, right? Like what are the trigger points around that in addition to sort of like standard behavioral FBA kinds of stuff?
Yeah, I mean, I think, which is aligned with the guidance, that any incident, the first incident, whether it's a complete surprise or maybe we've been responding to some behaviors and this happened, I mean, that convening of the problem-solving team and the development of the FBA or behavior plan is like, that is a trigger, like does trigger. A single incident will trigger that, especially if it's the first time. And if it's a student with an IEP, we've been, it's 2 incidences and you reconvene the IEP and you talk about, okay, what do we have available? What should we be doing differently? Sometimes maybe that's a referral to building bridges. Maybe it's we know the student really well and here's what's going on and we're gonna shift this part of the schedule or this member of the team or the strategy. I mean, it is really individualized and specific, but I would say that that's routine, right? So I don't think there's a specific like 3 incidences equals X or 4 it's this, but just like with any sort of removal or high stakes decision around a student, I'd say there's a lot of attention at the building level to ensure that the goal is to reduce that to 0, right?
Yeah.
Outside consulting and.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. So what the other things we've layered on, right? So that's when we talk about like, do we bring in our behavior consultant? Internal folk, do we bring in an internal, a person to help support the team and do some observations and help the team that maybe is like, just needs a fresh set of eyes? Do we bring in our external behavior consultant or consultants, depending on the age of the student, to give us a fresh lens? We actually did that quite a bit last year for several students. And it is helpful just sometimes to have somebody that doesn't know a student or a situation or a team member, just like, oh, like from my lens, I noticed X, Y, and Z. So that's routine, I would say. And I also wanted to mention just the idea, we've emphasized it in the training and with our staff, like just be really clear on seclusion is seclusion, right? So the downside of just looking at numbers on paper is this could be like, yep, you needed a break by yourself in a classroom space or a conference room, and like younger students they're really never like on their own to make decisions about where they're going, right? So like they're not always free to go wherever, but we're really trying and the team has done a really nice job of being clear about like, yeah, no, we weren't going to let them leave this space, so that is seclusion, and they may have been just like you said, throwing pencils in the corner or doing something too. So
but like you inhibited their ability to leave so that it comes to seclusion.
Yeah.
I appreciate that. A couple more questions. One is, speaking of seclusion and restraint, do you know of these incidents, what's the percentage of seclusion, what's the percentage of restraint, and what's the percentage that had both?
Yeah, I broke it down for this year, just kind of take a look at that. It's sort of interesting. It depends on like for which building, but so Sailor Prairie has the highest number, right? So 17 incidents of seclusion, 12 were restrained, so 9 had both, right? So there's some overlap there.
Yeah.
In most cases, there's a little bit of overlap. Seclusion is the highest incidence that's documented, but there is often overlap. And again, it's even for like, we talk a lot about that seclusion is for, whether it's for 2 minutes or 20 minutes, like you're just documenting that. In the physical restraint, I think people have been amazing about like, and almost like really, really conscientious of like keeping that to like the durations that we see coming on the reports are very, very minimal, and they're only for that imminent danger. That's really clear to know, right? Okay, your body's calm, you've got it under control. that's over, the seclusion's a little bit harder to navigate, right? Like how, like what's coming next and when are you truly ready to return? And I think that's a little trickier to capture in the documentation. It's the immediate threat or danger may have only lasted 2 minutes, and then there's the idea of just getting back to
Right.
regulation and
Yeah,
getting back to
yeah.
business, and so.
How you get actually back
There's
to.
conversations about that too, about like how much of that, you're only really restraining for like this amount of time. The student may have needed a longer amount of
Mhm.
time to get back to class or to regulation or to what's next
Yeah.
on the schedule, and that's different, but.
Yeah, yeah. Last question I have, and then I'll just say one thing, and then I will stop talking for at least a minute. What role does our student voice and our family voice play in our processes around developing behavior plans, talking through what seclusion restraint even is, particularly for students who might be more likely to engage in seclusion restraint? Encounter, I guess, is better. Engagement implies that I'm like here with it too.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I think so, again, we have always provided that, like, transparency and reporting, and it was optional until 2020, whatever, we've always sort of provided that to families, and that problem-solving conversation and getting the families involved up front. I mean, that's our stance on it, is
Yeah.
that no one should be ever surprised that this is happening and get their questions answered. And I think when you get to a scenario where maybe it's like been necessary more than once, so we're writing a behavior plan, could we do more to include student and family voice in that? Certainly. Is there ever an instance where that's not included at all? No. Families are involved, and that information is shared. As much as we want that to be a fully two-way conversation, I think our responsibility is to ensure clear communication about the danger to self and others piece, and then focusing on the proactive strategies we're gonna do to prevent that from happening. And to essentially ensure that your child's having a good experience in school and
Right.
is feeling safe and regulated.
Right. Last question, sorry, I thought I had only one, but then I had another one, so I apologize. Speaking of a good experience, to what extent do we engage in like restoration or repair with youth, so youth involved in the incident as well as the adults that were involved in the incident? And then obviously we think about restoration and repair from a classroom environment perspective too, because it's disruptive and impactful to individuals who see it, watch it, in addition to experiencing it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's something that we've definitely tried to focus and grow in the last, obviously the pandemic put a stall a little bit to that, but in the last year and a half for sure, but before the pandemic, that was really the focus. I think it's, we do involve the student and the parent in that conversation, and, kind of have to take their lead about how that looks and what that feels like a little bit, because sometimes it can be triggering and all the things that go along with that, but staff are asking for the restoration, students are asking for the restoration, so that it definitely happens, but we definitely need to kind of rebuild.
Yeah, kind of
the
more
process.
systematize it.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you both. I hope you know that I have nothing but the utmost respect for you two and all of your staff and all the building administrators. I know you're trying to do the best you can for kids, so please don't take my questions to mean anything other than what they are, which is to try to uncover how it is that we can get these numbers down to as low as possible for all kids, but particularly our youngest learners, right, where this sets the stage for how they feel about school from now until the next number of years. But know that it really comes from that place and not at all about you or your staff or our administration, our teachers who are doing fantastic work.
Yeah, and we appreciate the support and the understanding that we do see behaviors that are very challenging, and when things are a safety concern or a danger, like I guess just that we have those teams in place, and yet we can have the best process and the best teams, and it does take a toll on those involved. And so I think, to Shelby's point, right, that last stage of the crisis model is debriefing and repair and restoration, and the more we can continue to find the space for that, and allow the space for that, that is our goal as well, and to be able to support that and continue to stay in that problem-solving mode and out of the crisis mode as much as possible.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate both of you and appreciate my board colleagues for indulging me in my 20-minute Q&A.
Susan?
I would just like to add as well to Elizabeth's, It's difficult to look at the information from the pandemic years. So again, going back to, I think, the 2018, 2019, there's been a significant decrease in the incidence of seclusion or restraint. And I know that you have to report every year, and I kind of have a memory of that year, because the feeling was, even from you, ooh, that's a little high. So this is showing significant improvement. And so I would say thank you for the structures that you're putting into place to keep trying to make this better.
Yeah, and the number of students is comparable, right? So like, I think we'd like to see that get even smaller too, but I do think, yes, I would say we can't ask more from like the building leaders and the crisis team members, of just like their vigilance and attention and like how seriously they take this. And again, we don't want students to be in crisis either, so we appreciate that and definitely will continue to work on that.
All right, any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
You can go now, Kristen. This concludes that segment.
All right.
So, Chris, it's the time of year where she has to field 20 minutes of questions from Elizabeth.
All right, so next are board reports. Monona Grove Education Foundation, Susan Manning.
Yes. The Monona Grove Education Foundation met virtually on Tuesday, September 14th at 4 p.m. That was yesterday. The Monona Grove School District is no longer sponsoring, and hasn't been for several years, the 8th grade field trip. And so one of our teachers, Kevin Mickelbank, is taking a non-school sponsored trip for Monona Grove students to Washington, D.C. in the summer of, Dan, is that right, 2023, sorry. Mr. Mickelbank's request to the Monona Grove Education Foundation was to allow pass-through funding for student scholarship funds for this trip. There was significant discussion between Kevin and the board relating to pass-through for non-school sponsored events. The superintendent reported a great start to the school year. The snack pack committee is being formed within the foundation and will proceed with providing snack packs to students as previously provided. The golf ball drop is the major fundraiser of the foundation, will be held in Winnebago Park on Saturday, October 8th at 10 a.m. It's really fun to watch. I encourage you to go watch. There are all these golf balls falling all everywhere. You're encouraged to provide support either through a donation or purchasing of tickets online through the foundation website. Again, they use those funds for our kids, which is super.
Thanks, Susan. I actually went out of order, so actually, superintendent report, Dan.
I've got one item that I did not put on the written report that I'll give you more information later, but I wanted the board to know that next week is our fall superintendent's conference here in Madison, and Lorene and I will be presenting, or actually on a panel discussion as part of the conference, where it's also joining us are the superintendent and board members from La Crosse and South Milwaukee. And we're going to be talking about our equity work and the relationship between our administration and board and community in doing that work and the policy development and so on. So I'll send the board some more information about that. You might recall a few years ago, Eric joined me in a similar presentation about our work here in the district. So we're thrilled to be invited and looking forward to participating with that.
Dan, when you guys, if you use a PowerPoint or something, if you just make that available to, it'd be great for us to be able to see it. That would be super.
Sure, be glad to do that.
That's great that you were invited. Thank you.
Okay. All right, the other item I have, it's a little bit unique that I'm including as part of my report, but it's a policy piece with our technical corrections. You might recall every time that we get a Neola policy update, as the board goes through that work, there's always a few policies that there's technical corrections that don't require board approval, whether it be typos or those sorts of things. And usually I try to get those done at the same time we're doing that and share them out with the board. These happen to not get done till the summer, and so they just got submitted to Neola. And so, but our policy does require me to share with the board anytime we have these technical corrections. And so I did include the link for you, and that gives you the list of all of them that were included. And if you do click on that link, along the left column under the draft policies, it's under the header of archive materials, 9622. Those of you can see all the policies with the strike-throughs. And, just the first couple are real, like the vacancies, it's just, rewording where you put the word or the term Wisconsin statutes. Obviously, the vision and mission we have rewritten, so the board's already approved that. The third one is just a typo. It said state instead of start, and so those are the type of things that are technical corrections. But if you scroll through any of those, sometimes it is a rephrasing for clarity, but it can't be substantive, right? Obviously, only the board can approve policy changes, so it's meant to streamline the process and get those corrections in place. So our policy requires me at the time they're done to inform the board within the next meeting, so that's why you're getting them this evening.
All right, thank you, Dan. All right, next are possible action items. 2022-2023 revised extracurricular additive schedule.
Okay, so these are things that from time to time, will come to the board with, some updates as we develop new clubs or activities, or we want to make some adjustments. And one of the things through our review this past year, we realized that MG21 teachers do a lot of things, and they haven't been recognized on the additive schedule. And so Shelby and I had an opportunity to work with the team and look at some of the work they do that we believe really is outside of their normal teaching duties, that deserves some extra compensation. And so we looked at what we do in the other schools for some of those positions, and we came up with a number of these tonight that we're asking for approval. 6 positions that we think should be paid positions for the MG21 staff. These were presented to the governance board this evening. The MG21 governance board approved these, and now we're asking for your approval on these this evening. So I'll be glad to speak to any one of these if you have any specific questions.
Elizabeth?
I think it's great. I'm glad that we're doing it. Question about the school garden coordinator and just kind of how you arrived at that number. It's the lowest one in the schedule, so I'm always.
It is, so.
It's always my question, Dan.
Yeah, and so when we look at what some of those other, really, we looked to try to figure out how many hours are really incorporated with that. And so the garden, it's not a ton of extra time, and so there's not a real detailed form I can tell you, other than we just kind of looked at what some of their payment things
Yeah.
were. And this actually came from the recommendation from the MG21 staff.
Oh, great.
That they felt was a fair compensation.
Okay. I think just in general, while we're on this topic, like thinking about just like from an equity perspective, like if we're gonna do it based on like approximate hours, and like if we could have some kind of standardization. I don't know if there's a way to do it, but it feels like there ought to be.
Yeah, what we generally have tried to do is look at a comparable position that we're already paying and look, okay, this position we think is comparable in time and effort, skills compared to other
Yeah.
ones. That's kind of been our standard.
Yeah.
And I will say that every time we bring one forward, whether it be a recommendation from a school principal or in this case, the MD21 staff, we always do make sure there's conversation with the staff involved.
Okay, great.
So.
Thanks.
Dan, do we have garden coordinator staff work at any of the other schools?
We don't. For instance, I think you're aware there's a, Winnequa, that's me, oftentimes the PTO is very heavily involved with volunteers and so on. And so where this one is a little bit more directly tied to the student, curriculum and work.
The students being involved?
Yeah.
Okay, okay. If you would know about that, then if that needed to be added to any other school, right?
Well,
It's just that I know that they started, the garden, was it a Glacial Drumlin or was it a Taylor Prairie?
There's a garden at Taylor, isn't there? Did I make that up?
you know,
Yeah.
and I just
Yeah.
want us to be aware.
It happens a few different ways, okay? Sometimes it might be something myself or someone else on our team, you know, kind of becomes aware of that, oh, this is something that might fit. Most of the time, it's from a principal making a recommendation.
Okay.
Andrew?
I'd like to move approval of the 2022-2023 revised extracurricular and additive schedule as presented, or addictive, whichever.
Second.
All right, any further discussion? All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
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 Aye. Ayes have it, motion is carried. All right, next one is the 2022-2023 administrative position descriptions.
Okay, our board policy requires that the board approve job descriptions for all certified staff. And so, looking back historically, when Nicole came to the district, we did wholesale updating on most of the job descriptions, put them in the right format and so on. And then from there, usually the next time we look at it is when we have an opening, we're posting, and it's like, is this current and so on. And so, as you know, business services position was something that we posted this year, and that was one that kind of caught my attention. It needs to be updated from what some of the things that are happening. So we thought, Nicole and I thought now would be a good time to look at all of our district levels. So we really should be in a kind of rotation to look at all of our descriptions. So these are the positions at the administrative positions at the district level. Some of them are very minor changes, others a little bit more significant. So what we have for you is the clean copy of what we're asking for approval. The draft that shows the strike-throughs and highlights are a little bit messy. We had several people kind of working on them, but I thought they'd give you a little bit of a gist of some of the things that, you know, we're looking at. So, so not major changes, but just bringing up to speed on, for an example, our EL program, right? That could fall under student services or CNI. It's kind of gone back and forth. Right now it's under the CNI, you know, so just to get that, you know, up to date in those position descriptions.
All right. So it's all just, you think, the perception is that you're just updating these to accurately reflect what the jobs are, rather than adding or subtracting any additional?
Exactly. I will mention one piece that we've talked about before with regard to business services is the sustainability language. And that was something that, you know, we kind of tried to be thoughtful about how we crafted that, about what Mark's role is. Obviously, it's not something, you know, he alone does, but
Yeah.
certainly oversight, so.
Yeah, sure.
I just want to make sure you checked with the folks that are doing these jobs, right? To
Yeah.
make sure that these JDs align with what you
Yeah,
feel like you ought to be doing.
I don't know what you're talking about.
You know, it doesn't hurt to ask the question.
Did you know you were supposed to do this?
All you really need to do is say other assigned duties.
Yeah, well, that's why we put that one at the end.
You're right.
I really appreciate the explicit ICS language that you added in the JDs. I think that's a real nice way to kind of, another place to solidify the importance of that work. Cool.
Susan?
So Dan, did you feel that there were any substantive changes in any of these descriptions that you want us to know
No.
about?
No, not really. I
Not
think
really.
Peter
It was
said the most important thing is,
defining,
yeah, what
defining
is
things.
actually happening, make sure they're aligned.
Yeah, it's more than alignment. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, let me just procedurally, you know, jobs drift. What happens is responsibilities, you know, come and go. And it is important to update the job description. But it's also important just to reflect upon why we might not be doing something, you know, that a job has drifted away. Often there's excellent, good reasons, but does give you an opportunity to look back and say, hey, we used to do this. Why are we not doing this? I mean, usually often it's obvious, but it is important to keep in mind on, you know, everything we used to think was important. Wouldn't be in here if at one point we didn't think it was important.
All right, can I have a motion, please? Andrew?
Yeah. I make the motion to approve the 2022-2023 administrative position descriptions as presented.
Thanks.
Any further discussion? All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Ayes have it, motion is carried.
Can I just ask one more? Jan, in the initial board docs agenda, when we listed in the administrative content, revised job description for the following positions will be posted. The last bullet was student services and equity coordinator / MG21 administrator. And I don't think that's.
Nope. Great catch, and I'm glad you brought that up. I should have put some clarification there. So as you know, that's one of the other duties that's assigned for Shelby. And so when I initially looked at that, I was looking at combining that in the position description and then decided against it in that her, it does fall to the other duties assigned, but the specific responsibilities are outlined in the charter. So I thought that was a more appropriate place, to outline those duties.
Great, that's helpful. Thank you.
Well, also, like, that position could theoretically shift if it made more
Right.
sense for someone else to do it too. So that
Exactly.
gives you some flexibility without having it be in a specific job description.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, it has been different people.
Yeah.
Used to be the assistant high school principal, or what, again, kind of with the field. Yeah, I think it's nice that you did it that way. I appreciate that. It adds clarity for me. Thank you.
Shelby, you good?
I'm real good.
All right, there's no discussion items. Future meeting dates are located in board docs. And can I have a motion for adjournment?
I just a comment about future meetings. Our next meeting, I would need to attend virtually, if that can be arranged. I've got a family care issue I need to deal with, so that week.
Thank you. Okay, all right, you're
I have to
up.
make the motion to adjourn.
I love that. You're
I love that.
I'll second.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Ayes have it, motion is carried.
I take it back. You're
We are
high.
adjourned.
Okay, before you leave, I do need to confirm some committee dates and times and places.
Sorry, just a power button. Wait for it to restart.